glad to have you back. Also, don't forget that you should like this video if you want me to keep making more of these videos. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring the little bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date as I post new videos. And be sure to share this with your friends if you're really enjoying it. Just earlier today, one of my students had sent me a message that she was really enjoying it, and it just made me smile. It's nice to know that there are people on the other side of this camera, because sometimes it's just me and I don't really know who all is watching them. So it's great to have that feedback. I'm really enjoying watching all of this. I've seen so much positivity come from this, and I hope that you're feeling that as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start chapter 4. And just as a reminder, I am going to break this chapter into 2 parts as well, intentionally this time, because of the fact that this chapter is like 22 pages. So I didn't want you guys having like an hour-long video. All right, so let's go ahead and start chapter 4. Chapter 4 is titled At Flourish and Blots. There's that chapter picture for you. At Flourish and Blots. So life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life on Privet Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with the strange and unexpected. Harry got a shock the first time he looked in the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, "Tuck in your shirt, Scruffy!" The ghoul in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he felt things were getting too quiet. And a small explosion from Fred and George's room were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's house, however, wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. I really like how the author explains and describes things. I really feel like she leaves everything, or she writes everything that she really wants included, and you can really just picture what it is that she's trying to get across to her readers. And then the humor that's in there, like the ghoul yelling, "Tuck in your shirt, Scruffy." If you had a ghost in your house, what would that ghost be like? Would it be a weird ghost like him where he drops things and makes noises? Or would your ghost be helpful? Or, I don't know, sound off below. Tell me, what would your ghost in your house say and be like? Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4th helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table so that he could bombard him with questions about life with Muggles, asking him how to explain things like plugs and the postal service worked. "Fascinating," he would say as Harry talked him through using a telephone. "Ingenious, really. How many ways Muggles have found of getting along without magic?" Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning about a week after he had arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to breakfast, and he found Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with her face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. So there I think about, what is Ginny doing and how is Harry perceiving it? How does he see what Ginny's doing? If you've seen the movies, you know kind of how Ginny feels. And remember, Ginny is a year younger than Harry, so her face is red and she avoids seeing him. What type of actions does that show? And what clues does Harry keep missing? All right, so the letters from school, said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes in yellowish parchment, addressed in green ink. "Dumbledore already knows you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man. You two've got him too, he added, as Fred and George ambled in, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry's told him to catch the Hogwarts Express, as usual, from King's Cross Station on September 1st. There was also a list of the new books that he needed for the coming year. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Goshawk, Break with the Banshee, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Gadding with Ghouls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Holiday with Hags, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Travels with Trolls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Voyages with Vampires, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Wanderings with Werewolves, by Gilderoy Lockhart, and Year with the Yeti, by, you guessed it, Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. You've been told to get all Lockhart's books too, he said. The new Defense Against the Arts teacher must be a fan. Bet it's a witch. At this point, Fred caught his mother's eye and quickly busied himself with the marmalade. That lot won't come cheap, said George, with a quick look at his parents. Lockhart's books are really expensive. Well, we'll manage, said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked worried. I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of Ginny's things secondhand. Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair and put her elbow in the butter dish. Unfortunately, no one saw it except Harry, because just then Ron's elder brother Percy walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts prefect badge pinned to his sweater vest. Morning all, said Percy briskly. Lovely day. He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leapt up again almost immediately, pulling from underneath him a molten gray feather duster. At least that's what Harry thought it was, until he saw that it was breathing. Errol, said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. Finally, he's got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying that we were going to try to rescue you from the Dursleys. He carried Errol to the perch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it, but Errol flopped straight off again, so Ron just laid him on the draining board instead, muttering, pathetic. Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. Dear Ron and Harry, if you're there, I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay, and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry into trouble too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? But perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork, of course. How can she be? Said Ron with horror. We're on vacation! And we're going to London next Wednesday to buy new books. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can. Love, from Hermione. Well, that fits in nicely. We can all go and get your things then, said Mrs. Weasley, starting to clear the table. What are you all up to today? Sorry. Harry, Ron, Fred, and George were planning to go up the hill to the small paddock that the Weasleys owned. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They could use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they had escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples for one another to catch. They took turns riding Harry's Nimbus 2000, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often outstripped by passing butterflies. 5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They had asked Percy if he wanted to join them, but he said he was busy. Harry had only seen Percy at mealtime so far. He stayed shut in for his room the rest of the time. Wish I knew what he was up to, said Fred, frowning. He's not himself. His exam results came the day before you did. 12 OWLs, and he hardly gloated at all. Gloated, I like that word. Whenever you feel like you've done something really well and you tell everybody about it, that's gloating. Like kind of like you're putting it in everybody's face, like, oh, I'm so great. And Fred can't believe that his brother is not gloating. His brother is just being so very humble about everything. So the OWLs stands for Ordinary Wizarding Levels, George explained, seeing Harry's puzzled look. Bill got 12 too. If we're not careful, we'll have another head boy in the family. I don't think that I could stand the shame. Because remember, Fred and George, they like to get into a lot of trouble. So having somebody in the family that is so perfect is just, I can't believe it. So Bill was the oldest Weasley brother, and he and the next brother, Charlie, had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but knew that Charlie was in Romania studying dragons, and Bill in Egypt working for the Wizards' Bank, Gringotts. Gringotts? Yeah. Don't know how Mom and Dad are going to afford all the school stuff this year, said George after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart books, and Ginny needs new robes and a wand and everything. Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Stored in an underground vault at Gringotts in London was a small fortune that his parents had left him. Of course, it was only for the wizarding world that he had money. You couldn't use galleons, sickles, and nuts in Muggle shops. He had never mentioned his Gringotts bank account to the Dursleys. He didn't think their horror of anything connected with magic would stretch to a large pile of gold. Mrs. Weasley woke them all early the following Wednesday. After a quick 6 bacon sandwiches later, they pulled on their coats and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. We're running low, Arthur, she sighed. We'll have to buy some more today. Ah, well, guests first. After you, Harry dear. And she offered him the flower pot. Harry stared at them all, watching him. What am I supposed to do? He stammered. He's never traveled by Floo powder, said Ron suddenly. Sorry, Harry, I forgot. Never? Said Mrs. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things last year? I went on the underground. Really? Said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Were there escapers? How exactly? Not now, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Floo powder's a lot quicker, dear, but goodness me, if you've never used it before. He'll be all right, Mom, said Fred. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of the glittering powder out of the flower pot, stepped up to the fire, and threw the powder into the flames. And with a roar, the fire turned emerald green and rose higher than Fred, who stepped right into it and shouted, Diagon Alley! And vanished. The bee is back. You must speak clearly, dear Mrs. Weasley, told Harry as George dipped his hand into the flower pot, and be sure to get out at the right grate. The right what? Said Harry nervously as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. Well, there's an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from. You know, but as long as you've spoken clearly... He'll be fine, Molly. Don't fuss, said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to Floo powder, too. But, dear, if he gets lost, how would we ever explain to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't mind, Harry reassured her. Dudley would think that it was a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't worry about that. Well, all right. You go after Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, when we get to the fire, say where you're going. And keep your elbows tucked in, Ron advised. And your eyes shut, said Mrs. Weasley. The soot. Don't fidget, said Ron, or you might fall out of the wrong fireplace. But don't panic, and don't get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George. Trying to bear all of this in mind, Harry took a pinch of blue powder and walked to the edge of the fire, took a deep breath, scattered the powder into the flames, stepped forward, and the fire felt like a warm breeze. He opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. Diagon Alley, he coughed. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound promising. Speak clearly, and now he's coughing. It felt as though he had been sucked down a giant drain. He seemed to be spinning very fast, and the roaring in his ear was deafening, and it made, he tried to keep his eyes open, but the whirl of green flames made him sick. Something hard knocked his elbow, and he tucked it in tightly, still spinning and spinning. Now it felt as though his cold hands were slapping his face. Squinting through his glasses, he saw a blurred stream of fireplaces and snatched glimpses of rooms beyond. His bacon sandwich was turning inside of him. He closed his eyes again, wishing that it would all stop, and then he fell face forward onto cold stone and felt like a bridge of his glasses snap. Uh-oh. Just fell out of a fireplace. His glasses have broken, and he's gonna get sick. Doesn't sound promising. Dizzy and bruised, covered in soot, he got gingerly to his feet, holding his broken glasses up to his eyes. Can you imagine? He was quite alone, but where was he? He had no idea. All he could tell was that he was standing in a stone fireplace of what looked like a large, dimly lit wizard shop, but nothing in here was ever likely to be on Hogwarts' school list. The glass case nearby held a withered hand on a cushion, a blood-stained pack of cards, a staring glass eye. Evil-looking masks stared down from the walls, and an assortment of human bones lay upon the counter, and a rusty, spiked instrument hung from the ceiling. Even worse, the dark, narrow street that Harry could see through the dusty shop window was definitely not Diagon Alley. The sooner he got out of there, the better. Nose still stinging from where he had hit the hearth, Harry made his way swiftly and silently to the door. For those of you, a hearth is the brick kind of surrounding of a fireplace. Sometimes you have the mantle, which is kind of like a shelf above the fireplace, but the hearth is that big kind of metal or brick part that's around the fireplace. Usually you sit on the hearth and enjoy the warmth of the fire. So he had hit his nose on the hearth, probably when he fell out, went nose first, which would hurt. Well, he broke his glasses. So he made it out quickly and silently out the door, and before he got halfway toward it, two people appeared on either side of the glass. And one of them was the very last person Harry wanted to meet when he was lost, covered in soot and wearing broken glasses. Draco Malfoy. Harry looked quickly around and spotted a large black cabinet to his left, and he shot inside it and pulled the doors closed, leaving a small crack to peer through. Seconds later, the bell clanged, and Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who followed could only be Draco's father. He had had the same pale, pointed face and identical cold gray eyes. Mr. Malfoy crossed the shop, looking lazily at the items on display, and rang a bell on the counter before turning to his son, saying, "Touch nothing, Draco." Malfoy, who had reached for the glass eye, said, "I thought you said you were going to buy me a present." Spoiled, huh? "I said that I would buy you a racing broom," said his father, drumming his fingers on the counter. "What's the good in that? I'm not on a house team," said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. "Harry Potter got the Nimbus 2000 last year, special permission from Dumbledore, so that he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead." Malfoy bent down to examine the shelf full of skulls. Everyone thinks he's so smart. Wonderful Potter with his scar and his broomstick. You have told me this at least a dozen times already, said Mr. Malfoy, with a quelling look on at his son. And I would remind you that it's not prudent to appear less than fond of Harry Potter, not when most of our kind regard him as the hero who made the Dark Lord disappear. Ah, Mr. Borgin. A stooping man had appeared behind the counter, smoothing his greasy black hair from his face. Malfoy, what a pleasure to see you again, said Mr. Borgin with a voice as oily as his hair. Delighted, and a young Master Malfoy too, charmed. How may I be of assistance? I must show you, just in today, a very reasonably priced. I'm not buying anything today, Mr. Borgin, just selling, said Mr. Malfoy. Selling? And the smile faded slightly from Mr. Borgin's face. You have heard, of course, that the Ministry is conducting more raids, said Mr. Malfoy, taking a roll of parchment from his inside pocket and unraveling it for Mr. Borgin to read. I have a few items at home that might embarrass me if the Ministry were to call. And in that point, when we say that they're to call, they don't mean like to actually call. They mean to like call upon the door, meaning like knocking on a door, because you're calling into the house. So if the Ministry were to call, meaning if they were to show up at my house, I need to get rid of some things. Mr. Borgin fixed a pair of pince-nez to his nose and looked down at the list. So those are those like little like glasses. So he's looking at those. And so the Ministry wouldn't presume to trouble you, sir, surely. Mr. Malfoy's lip curled. I have not been visited yet. The name Malfoy still commands a certain respect, yet the Ministry grows ever more meddlesome. There are rumors about new Muggle Protection Act. No doubt that flea-bitten, Muggle-loving fool Arthur Weasley is behind it. Harry felt a hot surge of anger. And you see, certain of these poisons might make it appear. I understand, sir, of course, said Mr. Borgin. Let me see. Can I have that? Interrupted Draco, pointing at the withered hand on the cushion. Ah, the hand of glory, said Mr. Borgin, abandoning Mr. Malfoy's list and scurrying over to Draco. Insert a candle in it, and it gives light only to the holder. Best friend of thieves and plunderers. Your son has fine taste, sir. I hope my son will amount to more than just a thief or a plunderer, Borgin, said Mr. Malfoy coldly, and Borgin said quickly, No offense, sir, no offense meant. Though if his grades don't pick up, said Mr. Malfoy more coldly still, that may indeed be all that he is fit for. It's not my fault, retorted Draco. The teachers all have favorites, that Hermione Granger. I would have thought that you'd be ashamed that a girl of no wizard family beat you in every exam, snapped Mr. Malfoy. Ha, said Harry under his breath, pleased to see Draco looking both abashed and angry. It's all the same all over, said Mr. Borgin in his oily voice. Wizard blood is counting for less everywhere. Not with me, said Mr. Malfoy, his long nostrils flaring. So remember, nose is flaring. That means that the person must be getting mad or angry or annoyed. No, sir, not with me, sir, said Mr. Borgin with a deep bow. In this case, perhaps, we can return to my list, said Mr. Malfoy shortly. I am in something of a hurry, Borgin, and I have important business elsewhere today. They started to haggle, and Harry watched nervously as Draco drew nearer and nearer to his hiding place, examining the objects for sale. Draco paused to examine a long coil of hangman's rope and to read, smirking, the card propped on the magnificent necklace of opals. Caution, do not touch, cursed. He has claimed the lives of 19 Muggle owners to date. Wow, imagine a necklace and it's so cursed that it kills people, because if it claimed them, then it's taken them. So that means the person's died. Who knows, maybe it like sucks them into the necklace. That would be weird. All right, so Draco turned away and saw the cabinet right in front of him. He walked forward and he stretched out his hands for the handle. Done, said Mr. Malfoy at the counter. Come, Draco. And Harry wiped his forehead with his sleeve as Draco turned away. Good day to you, sir, or good day to you, Mr. Borgin. I'll expect you at the manor tomorrow to pick up the goods. The moment the door had closed, Mr. Borgin dropped his oily manner. Good day to yourself, Mr. Malfoy. And if the stories are true, you haven't sold me half of what you've hidden in your manor. Muttering darkly, Mr. Borgin disappeared into a back room, and Harry waited for a minute in case he came back. Then, quietly as he could, slipped out of the cabinet, past the glass case, and out of the shop door. Clutching his broken glasses to his face, Harry stared around. He had emerged into a dingy alleyway that seemed to be made up entirely of shops devoted to the dark arts. The one that he had just left, Borgin and Burke's, looked like the largest, but opposite of the nasty window display of shrunken heads, and 2 doors down, a large cage was alive with gigantic black spiders. 2 shabby-looking wizards were watching him from the shadow of a doorway, muttering to each other. Feeling jumpy, Harry set off and trying to hold his glasses on straight, hoping against hopes that he was able to find his way out of there. An old wooden street sign hanging over a shop selling poisonous candles told him that this was Knockturn Alley. This didn't help, as Harry had never heard of such a place. He supposed he hadn't spoken clearly enough through his mouth full of ashes and back in the Weasley's fire. Trying to stay calm, he wondered what to do. Not lost, are you, my dear? Said a voice in his ear, making him jump. An aged witch stood in front of him, holding a tray of what looked horribly like a whole human fingernails. She leered at him, showing mossy teeth, and Harry backed away. I'm fine, thanks, he said. I'm just... Harry! What are you doing? What do you think you're doing down here? Harry's heart leapt. So did the witch. A load of fingernails cascaded down around her feet, and she cursed in the massive form of Hagrid. The Hogwarts gamekeepers came striding toward them, in a beetle black eyes flashing over his great bristling beard. Hagrid! Harry croaked in relief. I was lost. Floo powder. Hagrid seized Harry by the scruff of his neck and pulled him away from the witch, knocking the tray right out of her hands. Her shrieks followed them all the way down the twisting alleyway out into the bright sunlight. Harry saw a familiar snow-white marble building in the distance, Gringotts Bank. Hagrid had steered him right into Diagon Alley. You're a mess, said Hagrid gruffly, brushing soot off of Harry so forcefully that he nearly knocked him into the barrel of dragon dung outside of the apothecary. Skulking around Knockturn Alley, I don't know, dodgy place, Harry. Don't want no one to see you down there. I realized that, said Harry, ducking as Hagrid made to brush him off again. I told you I was lost. What are you doing down there anyway? All right, so I'm going to stop there for today, and then we will pick back up to finish chapter 4 for our next video. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all enjoyed this reading, and I will see you all soon. Take care. Bye.